It's absolutely insane just how wrong people were about this Arizona basketball team.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network around. I'm your host, Leif Thulin, your resident college basketball guru, stats nerd, point guard by game, and ball knower by trade, and I'm excited to talk Arizona hoops with you today. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions do apply. Today on the show, I'm going to make 3 award pitches within the scheme of the Big 12 and nationally that Arizona Wildcats will be getting decorated with awards after the season after being left off all preseason lists. We talked about the Cousy Award snub that Bradley had. We talked about no players making all Big 12. We'll talk about what awards, both in the Big 12 and nationally, Wildcats will be decorated with. So let's dive right in. The first premise on this show is just how absurd it was to see the preseason poll in the Big 12 come out and have Arizona picked 4th. And that wasn't necessarily a shock. I thought it was too low. I said it then. I felt like it was a bit dismissive of a team with a decent retention rate in terms of what they bring back, an excellent coach, and a highly projectable scheme of how they play. What they brought back was good. What they brought back in a coach was great. And what they bring in terms of transfers or freshmen, in this case freshmen with Koa Peat, Braden Burries, Ivan Karchenkov, Dwayne Airstone, was excellent. And then you look at what Tommy Lloyd does and how that clientele fits his scheme, and it was very clear that this team was better than where they were projected, not only in the Big 12, but nationally. That was my contention there. But we'll see what happens in terms of the Big 12. There's a lot of season left. But Arizona, under Tommy Lloyd, even the year before this, rebounded the ball. And the year before this was the worst of Tommy Lloyd's his tenure. They rebounded the ball well, scored the ball a ton, and that's more projectable in terms of things you can rely on for a coach than anyone in the conference other than by brand alone, other than maybe Houston. And Houston lost more than Arizona did, but obviously they went to the championship game and they brought back plenty. Houston defense is going to be great. They're going to rebound the ball, and I would argue their brand retention is probably stronger than Arizona's. I have no issue. But anyone else, I think you're lying to yourself if you're picking a team that you trusted the brand more than Arizona. Kansas isn't Kansas of old anymore. They could still be really great because their team is getting better around them, and Darren Peterson, when he comes back from a hamstring, is spectacular. He's in my opinion, the best player in the country. But picking Arizona 4th was less insulting due to the excellent top of the conference with hype behind BYU and Texas Tech following Houston. I wasn't terribly insulted by that. The conference is elite, and that's what that says more than Arizona is bad. And I said that then. And I think that finish could happen, the standings that they projected. But that wasn't the wild thing. The wild thing was, even though I said Arizona would finish top 2 in this conference, and I still believe they'll be top 2, I think number 1 in the conference, the insulting thing was that none of the players on a team as good as Arizona, that was ranked 13th by the AP poll and 4th in the Big 12, got the nod to be one of the 10 best players in the conference, when Arizona very easily could have 2 All-Americans. So here's my first take. Arizona is not the most talented team in the country, but they have the best top 8 in the country. Their potential of many of their players is realized. And what I mean by that is they have the maturity to play their roles. I'm speaking of Tobe Awaka. I'm speaking of Anthony Del Orso. And those guys aren't going to, wow you as much as potential 6th and 7th man around the country that are 5-star All-Americans. And you say, well, what can they be down the road? But they're really good already, and they're very good at their role. They star in their role, and they play a very important role. Their talent is fulfilled. So how can a team have the best top 8 in the country and not have one top 10 player in a conference? That is insane. And that's the reason that I think that they're vastly underrated, and the national media was way off when evaluating Arizona. And for those of you who've been following since the beginning of the season, I've been pretty steadfast in this, but it's getting stronger both nationally and in my own perception, because I'd argue fairly confidently that if Arizona finishes as a top 2 seed in March, which was my prediction before the season, which seems very attainable right now with the outline of going 11-2 or 12-1 in conference play. Right now they're 6-0 with wins over 3 of the best teams that all 3 Arizona was favored to lose against. and you go 11-2 or 12-1 in that, and then you start well against an inferior opponent schedule for the first 7 Big 12 play, you start 18-2, 19-1, 20-0, and you finish decently, that's pretty likely, especially in what is one of the best conferences, if not the best conference, that a top 2 seed in March from the Big 12, which is going to be the best conference in college basketball, will have an All-American. Let's look at recent history. That's my first take. Last year at Texas Tech was a 3, and Toppin was an All-American. Kansas got representation from Dickinson, which I actually thought was erroneous. He was the second-team All-American. Kansas was a 7 seed and a bad 7 seed. And then a 1 seed Houston had L.J. Cryer represent them as a third-team All-American from what was a very strong team, but an egalitarian attack. The Big 12 is the best conference in America this year, and last year's best conference was the SEC. And they had 3 first-teamers, one from a second seed and 2 from 1 seeds, and another third-teamer from another second seed. Winning is the best trick, right? Winning as a whole, being a top 2 seed, but also doing it from the best conference does the trick. The same recipe from the year before was rewarded as well. The first team was only 1 and 2 seeds. And the year before that, Tubelis was a second teamer, and they were the 2 seed. And the year before that, Benedict Matherin was a second teamer, and they were the 1 seed. This recipe is repeatable, and it means win, and you'll be represented on the podium. So let's now factor in the 1 or 2 seed with what Koa Peat averages. 16, 6, and 3. And that number I actually expect will grow because he'll have more usage than when he plays the inferior opponents like he does against these 3 bye games. And they limit his statistical representative numbers, but we see his impact. And he does less out of lack of necessity. I expect Koa to be featured on an All-American team by the end of the year and easily representing the Big 12 Conference All-Conference team. My goal for him was be one of the best 10 players in conference, meaning first or second team, because I think there should only be 5 players on any all-conference team. But especially if they do 10 and 5, one of the best 15, that's for sure attainable. But I also expect him first team all-conference if it's 10. And if you're that and your team's as good as Arizona is, and you have multiple first-team All-Americans projected, which is 3 of the 5 come from the Big 12. It was A.J. DeBonsa, Darren Peterson, and J.T. Toppin. They came from the Big 12. If Arizona's better than all those teams, it's pretty hard to leave off a guy who's averaging 16 and 7 or something like that with good efficiency on what will be a 1 or a 2 seed. That's what I think is going to happen for Arizona. And that's why I think Koa Peat is an All-American. Koa Peat can be an All-American, and there's an award. And if you're an All-American, you're going to be all-conference. So that's where the first issue is in the National Player of the Year voting and all these representative awards and saying who's going to make all-conference team. I think they did a very poor job. And, I don't know any of these people that are voting, or at least I don't think I do. And I'm sorry to offend you if I do. I think it was pretty clear that Arizona was mishandled when evaluating them in the preseason because it was clear-cut they were going to be good. And honestly, if you know ball, really good. So coming up next, I'm going to talk about the case for Jaden Bradley to bring back some hardware to McHale, maybe as a team, but also as one of 4 Wildcats that I think will earn postseason honors. All that and more ahead on Locked On Wildcats. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push to climb back into the game. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you guys for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network around. I'm Leif Thulin with the air host of Locked On Wildcats. And I told you before the season, I thought Arizona will be a team that can win a championship, a team that should be a 1 or a 2 seed, a team that will finish in the top 2 of the standings in the Big 12, which I predict will be the best conference in America. So far, so good on those projections, even beating a team that I thought would be one of the few that could challenge Arizona in the Connecticut Huskies. I mentioned last time, I think Koa Peat will be an all-conference guy, no doubt, a potential All-American, And I'll make the case that Arizona, the Wildcats, land 2 of the best 15 players in the land, aka All-American status right here, but certainly an all-conference spot for one Jaden Bradley. Here is the pitch. Jaden Bradley is the point guard, and he's the most important player on one of, if not the best team in the country at this juncture of the season, and likely a team that has a ton of room to grow, as I've mentioned many times, because the youthful pieces are only going to get better on a team that has beaten 3 teams ranked higher than them prior to the season. It's just exceedingly rare in the annals of college basketball history. You don't see teams beat 3 teams. You don't play teams that are ranked higher than you 3 times, especially if you're as good as Arizona is, and you don't beat all 3 of them if you do. But like I said, point guard is the most important player. I did a episode at the very start of my start of being the host of Locked On Wildcats, and it was essentially, well, I think Koa Peat is the best player in the Wildcats. I think Jaden Bradley is the most important, and the Wildcats go as far as he goes. And my point was essentially, if he can control tempo, he can get downhill and score, and if he can knock down a couple threes and keep defenses honest, watch out for how good this offense can be. But my biggest thing I should have said then, and I am going to say now, is winning is a point guard stat. Let me reiterate that. Winning is a stat that gets attributed to the point guard and the coach. And in a year in, year out basis, with a player getting lesser stats, some guys, if their team is that good and he is a prominent figure and plays winning basketball, they'll make an All-American due to their instrumental role in taking them to the highest of highs. And in Bradley's case, his stats are not insignificant at all. But what I'm talking about is his role and the exact role he played as the closer in winning 3 games out of 3 against the primary competition that you can play in our sport. That top 12 AP teams, UCLA was 12th, Florida was 3rd, UConn was 4, and in all 3 of those, he served as the closer. And in all of those, he played a prominent role, propelling Arizona to what is the number 2 spot in the rankings right now, and in my opinion, will be a top 2 seed in March. And if you do that, and you score 16 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists like he has right now, along with being a fantastic defender, and you put up those same statistics, and I think he may even do more, because in some of these games, like I mentioned with Koa Peat, the games that Arizona has dominated against inferior opponents, he has not played much, and when he has played, he has not asserted himself. So if you count just the 3 games that he's played, he's outdueled projected All-American. It was the 6th most votes given to Donovan Dent. He outdueled him badly in Inglewood, and then killed the national champions from last year, Florida, who had a new backcourt that was getting all SEC buzz, and then beat UConn, who has Silas Demer, who's a very good guard, and Solo Ball, who's also a very good guard. In all of these games, he is the common denominator for excellence. He's averaging 21 points per game against high major competition throughout this year. And then you look at history for point guards and history for All-American status. That's what we're going to do next. We're going to investigate a little bit. And because I'm a nerd, I didn't have to do much research because I'm passionate about the point guard play and I'm passionate about college basketball. But last year, off the top of my head, there were 3 point guards that made first-team All-American. 2 were from top 2 seeds, and that was Walter Clayton Jr. and you had Alabama's Mark Sears, and so that was a 1 seed and a 2 seed, and the other being Braden Smith, who had a staggeringly good year and is the favorite to win National Player of the Year this year. That's 3 point guards, and that's helpful for Bradley's case, as many thought last year would be a big man year. Maybe this year is a big man year, but last year, 3 of the 5 best players in the country were guards. The second team featured 2 point guards, both of whom were prolific scorers, and neither were on great teams, but they both put up numbers, and I'm talking seriously impressive numbers. Cam Jones from Marquette last year, until February, in my opinion, was the best guard in the nation, bar none, over Mark Sears, over Braden Smith, and over Walter Clayton Jr. The issue, his team did not have the requisite ability to support him, and his numbers started to fade as teams really isolated on him. The other being PJ Haggerty, who's now at Kansas State, but last year's at Memphis, and Memphis was led to a 5 seed, but Haggerty's not necessarily a winning player and hasn't been throughout his multiple stops, but he can really score the ball. And when Bradley is on a top 2 seed in March, he deserves the edge, and here is the proof in the pudding. Third team featured LJ Cryer, who, in my opinion, was a 2 guard, but he was small enough where many people would say, oh, there's the point guard spot filled. But why this matters is a 1 seed, even one with an egalitarian attack like Houston had, they'll always get an All-American. And that bodes super well for Bradley. And here is the true proof, because I'm talking about All-American. You don't need to be a first teamer, but I'm talking one of the 15 best players. The true proof is Zakai Ziegler. Zakai Ziegler did not deserve All-American honors, nor SEC first team honors, but he got them, third team All-American and back-to-back first team All-SECs for the following stat lines: 14 points, 7 assists, and 3 rebounds on 40% from the field. 40% from the field is not good. 32% from 3 is not good, and 3 turnovers per game. He was a good defender. He was given first team All-SEC defense and actually Defensive Player of the Year, which baffles me because his teammate was the best defender in the SEC and maybe the country in Jemai Meshack. I digress there. The year before, he was honored for first team SEC, which once again was one of the best conferences, for scoring 12 points a game and being inefficient in doing so. He was a good defender, a very good one, in fact. But Bradley is better because he's bigger, more versatile, and a far better offensive player because he's more efficient, gets downhill, and creates for others. And I think that Arizona is better than last year's Tennessee team. And like I said, if this team may well be better, and he's playing alongside Koa Peat, but the guard position has this chokehold on the awards, I think it's very likely Jaden Bradley gets honored if Arizona's as good as I think they will be. Also, Jaden Bradley may well lead this team in scoring. I predict it'll be Koa Peat. I think it'll be Koa Peat, but Jaden Bradley in the big games has stepped up and scored 21 a game efficiently. You might even encourage him to shoot more. To me, that's an ironclad way to be represented on all conference teams and a bona fide case to be an All-American. And if Arizona's as good as I think they will be, as I foresee them being, and I had them as a top 2 seed before the season began, as a top 8 team in the country, with Bradley at 15 points per game, and I said he should be an all-conference guy. But I would say at 16 a game, and the way that he's had those 16 a game and 21 a game against those good teams, he's well ahead of my curve. And the team is too. He's had marquee moments, and that matters. I think that he is a lock to be on the all-conference team and a very possible guy to be an All-American. The issue he'll have with being an All-American is he'll have to outduel Darren Peterson, Braden Smith, Bennett Sturtz, PJ Haggerty, Milos Uzan, Taman Lipsy, and LeBaron Philon. Like, those are the prominent guards that may have gotten more buzz. But that's also his greatest blessing. You know why? He has a chance to beat many of their teams. And for those are schools, including Alabama, where Philon goes, Bama, Iowa State, Kansas, Kansas State, and many others prominently feature point guards and Houston in the Big 12 or in the non-conference schedule. And winning cures all, and winning aids representation and awards for better or worse. I would not be stunned to see Jaden Bradley as a top 5 finisher for the Koozie after not being named to the preseason top 20 watch list, or an All-American finish, finishing higher than many of whom I just named for the top 10 Koozie Award finishers, right? Like, those guys are locks to be on there. And so is Donovan Dent. But Bradley's the most important player on one of the best teams in America, and he'll be happy with that. And so will we. Like, Arizona's got a real chance to have numerous players represented individually, but what they want is to win it all, and they have a chance to do that. And if you do well, individual representation will happen too. Coming up next, I'm going to make a pitch for 2 more Wildcats, maybe even more, to be honored for postseason awards, and I don't even think it's facetious. All that and more ahead on Locked On Wildcats. College football's back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, and the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices, jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices. With no surprise fees, what you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games as low as $25. It's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket. Go download Game Time today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the number one sports podcast network. We really appreciate you. I'm Leif Thulin, host of Locked On Wildcats, and I've made a pitch for Koa Peat and Jaden Bradley, and I think these are pretty obvious pitches for all conference representation. The first one of the two I'm going to give you right now, I don't think is surprising at all, because if you hear me talk about Arizona basketball, because you listen to this show, the reason I think Arizona is so good and ahead of where I even projected them to be right now is twofold. Offense is going to be good, and it's going to be very good all season. The question I had was, how great can they be on defense? Or really, I should rephrase, how good they can be on defense. And right now, they've been great. And Mo Krivas should be in the running both nationally, if Arizona stays as good as they are defensively, which is in the top 10, but certainly in the Big 12, for Big 12 Player of the Year defensively, or Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. The top 10 in defense and most pivotal player on a very good team is a very good recipe. He will not win it nationally, and likely not in the Big 12 either, due to stats being pedestrian in terms of block shots, but he should be in there. And I expect this award to be named this award to be named to a guy in his same conference, so it hurts his chances to win both. But if the voters really know basketball, then he should be named as a National Defensive Player of the Year candidate and receive votes. JoJo Tugler should win the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, and anyone else getting it would be a surprise. After him, I think Krivas is the best defender in the conference, and arguably Arizona's a better team. At least this point, they have been the better team. I have not been impressed by Houston. That said, they're undefeated still and are going to get better because they also have young players. Additionally, if we're looking for postseason representation as a whole, just like making an all-defense team, which, that counts. If we're looking at that, Jaden Bradley should be in an all-conference defense team too. I don't think he's going to be an all like the National Defensive Player of the Year candidacy, but like I wouldn't be mad at that either. To me, the defensive conference, if I rattle this off the top of my head, it's probably JoJo Tugler, Mo Krivas, Jaden Bradley, Keba Keita, and Taman Lipsey as the best 5 defenders in the conference. Let me know if I'm missing someone. That's off the top of the dome, but I feel pretty good about that, honestly. I do like that lineup. That should be the top 5 defensive players in the conference. And the last winner of the award for Arizona should be Tommy Lloyd. The guy wins every year. Entering the year, he had a 78% win percentage, and yet people only talk about that he hasn't gotten past the Sweet 16. He was projected 4th in the conference this year, and I know I'm ahead of myself, but he has this team looking like the best team in the conference. And need I remind you that Ken Pom has had him top 13 each year he's been at Arizona. And 3 of those 4 years, he was a one seed or a 2 seed. The other year that was a down year was disastrous. Last year was a 4 seed. Arizona was projected at this point in the season to be 3-3 and maybe 4-2 by the optimistic. 9-4 was the likely non-conference according to you guys. And now that would be disastrous to be 9-4, considering they started 6-0. That would be a disaster. But that just points out how ahead of schedule Arizona is and how low the nation was. And honestly, some of you guys were about Arizona this year. You guys had question marks. I don't think all of you guys were really vibing with the projection that I put out there saying that this is a top 8 team in the country from the get-go and should be a 1 or 2 seed pretty easily. The Big 12 starts out and allows for a lot of wins for Arizona because they play a weak schedule. That can be for better or worse. You can say like the backloaded thing is not going to go well. But that said, being picked 4th helps lower expectation and allows highlighting of overachievement as a team. And Tommy Lloyd gets praised for it. I see that as very possible, and maybe even National Coach of the Year, right? Like I think that's a possible destination for Tommy Lloyd, taking his team to a 1 seed if he can do so and winning the Big 12. If that happens, it's hard to overlook him as a candidate for that. The last thing I want to add, along with Pete and Bradley as all-conference first team, or at least second team, at the very least, I think Krivas has a chance to be all-conference, honorable mention, maybe second team, and should be all defense, like I outlined, as should Bradley. But that's not it. Pete will be all freshman, like I guarantee that. I expect Tobe Awaka and Anthony Delorso to be heavily in the mix for 6th man of the year. They might be battling one another for the 6th man of the year. I would go Tobe Awaka for 6th man of the year, but like Delorso could win it. Awaka could certainly win it. And you look around the nation, especially in the Big 12, and I don't see anyone else that I see really beating those guys out for it. Like I think that's those 2 guys award to lose. And I will revisit and see if there's a team that is not as good that has a 6-man scoring ton. But like the Big 12 is elite. So you're going to find one of the really good teams has a really good player, 6-man. That's probably it. So that's another award. That's all very reasonable. And I don't even think these are outside the realm of possibility. Like, let me know if you think I'm getting ahead of myself. But I think these are all within the realm of possibility. And maybe I expect some of these to happen. And I'll end my picks with this, right? Like, I like prognosticating. I like predictions. I like making fun lineups. So I'll give you my projections for all conference right now before the conference play starts. So bear with me if these change as conference play starts. But watching as much basketball as I've done already, which is not enough, but I've watched plenty, more than most people would watch in a season because I'm a total nerd. I'll do the preseason list of top 10 players in the conference, meaning first team, though I think 5 is the way to do it. It's the only way to do it. I'm just going to do it that way so we have at least the same format so we can see who's been added and who's been dropped. This was the preseason. I researched this ahead of time. AJ was a unanimous decision to make the team. Richie Saunders, his teammate at BYU, Emmanuel Sharp, Joseph Tugler, Milos Uzan at Houston, he was unanimous. Tamin Lipsey at Iowa State, Darren Peterson unanimous. PJ Haggerty at Kansas State, Christian Anderson and JT Toppin he was unanimous, and he was the projected player of the year. Here is my 10. There are some that overlap. There are some that do not. AJ, Darren Peterson, JT Toppin, Koa Peat, Tamin Lipsey, Joshua Jefferson, Christian Anderson, PJ Haggerty, Jaden Bradley, Milos Uzan. That's my 10. So who did I drop? I dropped Tugler, Sharp, Richie Saunders. I think the rest of them I kept. And then I had my own additions being Pete, Bradley, and Jefferson. Jefferson's fantastic, by the way, if you haven't watched him. My next 5, if we do a second team, that would be top 15 players. I'd go Richie Saunders, Emmanuel Sharp, Flory Badunga, Kingston Flemings, Milan Momcilovic, and maybe you go Cam Carr for Baylor if you need the representation from there. But one of those guys. All freshmen would be Darren Peterson, AJ DeBonsa, Koa Peat, Tunde Yesufu, and I'll go Braden Burries. I think Braden Burries turned the corner. Well, there's another guy named Sean Abaya from Cincinnati that has a chance in that, and maybe Killian Toure from Iowa State. Those are my projections. So let me recap for you. Arizona gets an All-American, at least one between Koa Peat and Jaden Bradley, potentially 2. They have a potential national coach of the year, the front runner, in my opinion, for coach of the year in the Big 12 in Tommy Lloyd, a defensive, all first team defensive for the, I would honestly say the nation at this point, but certainly for the conference in Mo Krivas, first team Koa Peat, first team Jaden Bradley, all conference defense Jaden Bradley, and the 6th man of the year, Tobe Awaka and Anthony Delorso. Crazily enough, absolutely 0 of these players got recognition before the season. The national media was dead wrong on Arizona, and Arizona is a national championship contender. And when you're a contender to win a championship, you're a contender to win individual awards and be recognized down the road. So thank you guys for listening to Locked On Wildcats as always. Thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big 12. Drake Toll breaks down the most exciting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to championships and everything in between, every game in between. Find Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast, or the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.